Tragedy struck Uttar Pradesh's Bareilly district when 3 people died after their car plunged into a river, reportedly led astray by Google Maps. The victims, identified as Vivek and Amit, along with a third unidentified person, were traveling from Gurugram to Bareilly to attend a wedding. Relying on Google Maps, they were misdirected to an unfinished flyover, which ended in disaster. The car fell into the Ramganga River from a height of 50 feet. Locals discovered the damaged car the next morning along with the 3 bodies. Police were informed and the bodies were taken for a post-mortem examination. The family members of the victims are outraged and have blamed the concerned officials for this incident. They have raised questions asking why the bridge was left unfinished. They also asked why no barricades were put into place to prevent any accidents. Now let's take a look at the action that's been taken so far. An FIR has been lodged against the assistant engineers and a case has also been registered under Section 105 of the BNS. Officials from the Public Works Department have been ordered to visit the spot as they are responsible for putting up signage boards. The FIR also says that the PWD has shown great negligence.
एक वैगनार कार जो कि टैक्सी प्रतीत होती है, वह एक निर्माणाधीन पुल जिसका अप्रोच रोड दातागंज बदायूं की तरफ से था, उस पर चढ़ गई थी और ऐसा प्रतीत हो रहा है कि अचानक पुल खत्म होने से वह बीच नदी में गिर गई। वहां मौके से 3 लोगों के शव निकाले गए जिनकी मौके पर ही मृत्यु हो जाना प्रतीत हो रहा है। इन तीनों के पहचान के प्रयास किए गए तो इनमें 2 के आईडी कार्ड से उनकी पहचान अमित और विवेक जो कि इमादपुर फर्रुखाबाद के निवासी हैं ऐसी हुई है। इनके परिजनों को सूचना दे दी गई है और एक अन्य की पहचान के प्रयास किए जा रहे हैं। थाना पुलिस द्वारा शव को कब्जे में लेकर पंचायतनामा की कार्रवाई की गई है एवं पोस्टमार्टम हेतु भिजवाया जा रहा है।
दीवार को तोड़ा गया, पक्की दीवार थी।
नहीं, जो वो अप्रोच रोड थी
उधर का जो वो बाढ़ आने के कारण पिछले साल बह गई थी।
अच्छा,
बाढ़ से बह गई थी।
अच्छा,
उसी के लिए मॉडल स्टडी के लिए गया हुआ है। रुड़की की टीम आके मॉडल स्टडी करेगी, तब वो बताएंगे कि पुल आगे बढ़ेगा या धारा प्रवाह को रोकने के लिए सुरक्षात्मक उपाय।
तो एक्शन साहब किसे जिम्मेदार मानते हैं आप इसको, जो हादसा हुआ है?
अब इसमें जो भी जिम्मेवारी होगी वो आप अपने अधिकारियों की फिक्स करेंगे।
जांच का विषय है।
We now want to welcome 2 guests to the broadcast. We have Mr. Shri Pradip Sarkar, who is a partner and a leader, also is an expert when it comes to the fields of digital trust and transformation, joining us. We also have Mr. Pradip Sarkar, who is a road safety expert. Gentlemen, thank you so much for taking out the time to discuss this horrific accident with us. Mr. Pradip Sarkar, I do want to come to you first, and I wanted to ask you that considering that Google Maps uses satellite imagery, why didn't it show that this bridge was incomplete? What exactly accounts for this sort of a gap?
Thank you, Aayesha. Thank you for having me on your show today. I think first and foremost, I would like to say that the responsibility when it comes to early warning, responsibility when it comes to hazardous conditions, road conditions, and those kind of things, do not rest on anybody like a Google or anybody else. That responsibility lies with the government. That is primary responsibility of the PWD. And at the same time, when you look at some of these things in terms of Google and what it's primarily loading up, Google has satellite imagery, but it never claims that these are real-time satellite imagery, right? So they have a time lag for a couple of days or a couple of months when they actually capture this particular information, and they basically load a lot of the maps and other information based on that. They also predict traffic and other conditions based on the usage of people. If multiple people are moving with Google Maps, they also do some predictions on those in terms of the road time that it will take for you to reach a particular destination, what are the conditions in terms of the traffic backup and those kind of things, and which is where I think now they've also introduced a new feature within Google for citizens to basically report hazardous conditions or those kind of things. When you're driving, you can actually do that, right? In terms of the tool itself, that's something that you can do. But however, I would say that they cannot at any point in time be able to predict real time because that is not the kind of service that they're providing. So in this particular case, when somebody was using Google Maps and he was following a particular road condition, possibly at some point in time, there was information possibly uploaded to Google and all thing that this road was complete, and possibly that was misinformation that was sent across to them. That is one thing that they need to look at. But at the same time, I think it was the responsibility of the appropriate authorities to put the right kind of signs, the barricade, and all things. Why would somebody be able to drive off a bridge, which essentially was almost like 50 to 100, 50 to 60 feet above? Why was somebody able to drive off without any barricade or nothing? If they had seen those particular barricades, they would have immediately stopped. And which is where I think the fundamental issue is. And if people are trying to blame technology provider for this and not the government, I think there is some major issue on that.
Absolutely. Mr. Parthasarathi, thank you so much for joining us and giving us that information about, also that perspective actually, about what exactly is important here when we're talking about the responsibility. Do stay with us. Mr. Sarkar, I want to come to you next. At the outset, when you take a look at this entire horrific case, how much of the blame would you put on the driver?
In fact, driver has some sort of responsibility because you are driving in the night time, and he should make sure the safety measures put in, because always when he's driving on a road, most of the safety features are in place. And I think it is in the dark time. I think he must not be aware, he has taken his granted that everything is okay. But above all, I like to say that is the main responsibility goes to the authority, because the engineer concerned, he should ensure that proper safety measures are taken care of, which is not absolutely there. I do not also understand that there is no safety measures in respect of signages, marking, and also during the night time, I have seen in abroad, there's some sort of your blinker. Even some in our urban area also it is happens, because when there is a danger, some sort of blinker also put it installed so as to ensure the message properly is communicated. So that is also was absent, I think. So I will not fully blame driver, and I will say that firstly the authority concerned have to take the blame, and next point also, as the first speaker was talking about, I think that I should not also blame Google. Google, because Google is only have the data. It has its satellite imagery. It has its what you call third-party data. Also, the user-generated data. And in case the data is not, there is some inconsistent data, that also creates a problem. And sometimes there is a problem also, dynamic change, which has happened exactly on this spot. That is, road, buildings, and other infrastructure can change frequently. What I observe, very frequently we find that buildings and bridges is getting changed in terms of repair, in terms of construction activity, and even if the building closes, and if the data is not updated on a real-time basis, that can also lead to a disaster. That exactly what has happened here. Apart from, we have seen there is a users also, it has also implication on the users contribution, because users also is allowed to provide data in case the data is not consistent. This also creates a problem. Also problem with the geographic location. Sometimes the geographic location, the sparse development, data does not give you the accuracy. And sometimes the route algorithm, many times I find does not really talk to the on the shortest path, or which should have been in case it's not shortest path, at least the area is a safe routing. That I think Google does not incorporate the concept of safe routing, because of the lack of updated data. And also apart from that, there is a question of your privacy and legal constraint. That also one of the areas, because in some area has some legal restriction or privacy, you also are not in a position to update the data. And finally, I'll say that there's a technical limitation with the Google GPS signal, which are many times are interrupted because of the when you're passing through a forest, when some dense activity are there, it does not get that kind of clarity in the signal communication. I think these are the basic areas of concern that need to be looked into. Of course, I put the authority who has to take the responsibility in terms of providing and ensuring safety measures, which is not absolutely not there.
Absolutely, because also on that note, there are PW officials that have been sent to the spot because ultimately they are the ones who are responsible for putting up that signage. Mr. Parthasarthi, I want to come back to you. Mr. Sarkar, thank you so much for giving us that answer, but do remain with us. Mr. Parthasarthi, Google has a monopoly on the map-making sector. Why so? Why don't we see other companies enter into the field and become as popular? This is borrowing the brand power that Google does hold.
I think here, one of the things when I look at Google Maps, while they have a monopoly in this particular space, I think there are multiple providers that are available today. There's MapMy India, and there are quite a few other providers too. I'm not just batting for Google today, but I'd like to say that there's enough opportunity for other people to develop applications. But what happens is the moment a provider becomes vague, that coverage, the depth of information, and the ability to provide that particular information becomes significant. Second is they have the money power to give this particular application free, right? How many people are willing to pay for a map application, which is where I think the challenge is today. Everybody would like to have it for free, and it is where it is. And at the same time, I think that's where these particular data giants are really going after the people providing them information. So, for example, if Google knows where you're traveling, Google knows how to basically advertise in terms of hotels. Google knows how to advertise in terms of other things. They know what is your travel destination. They know all of that particular information, so they can provide you specific targeted advertisements on that. So that is where they are basically making their money. And I think if other organizations want to do something similar, where they want to monetize on data, they should be allowed to do so. I don't think there is any restriction. But of course, with what Mr. Sarkar said, there are limitations related to security, privacy, and other things that they need to take into consideration. But Google has hit on a what I would call as a business model, and which they are basically monetizing, and they've been monetizing for a very long time. They have Gmail, they have Google Maps, they have Google Pay. You can name it. They have a variety of different tools, and with those particular tools, pretty much the person's profile and everything can be captured to the T, right, in terms of what it is. So from that aspect, I would say they will continue to do that unless we as other private organizations want to really step up and basically provide more information on that. But otherwise there is no restriction. Other people can also provide it, but it's just that the business model is not viable for them.
All right, all right. Mr. Parthasarthi, thank you so much for joining us and giving us that perspective into this. Mr. Sarkar, coming to you for the final question. You are a road safety expert, so you would have knowledge on this. When there is an incomplete bridge or a road which has not been completed when it comes to the construction, what exactly are the measures that are put into place to ensure that those who are traveling, who are using the transportation system, do not become a victim?
You said, because I also mentioned that the responsibility goes to the authority who is responsible for constructing the bridge. And generally,
It
as a
does,
safety
yes.
officer, when I go for the safety auditing, generally many flaws I have come across, and we generally give a report to the competent
Okay.
authority, particularly National Highway Authority of India. And based on that, they take the remedial actions. But most of the time, I have seen contractors do not really adhere to the recommendation made by the road safety officers. So that is one of the flaw, and perhaps our the systems, rules and regulation, and maintain and adhering to the rules and regulation, and and ensure that if you do not get into the proper rules and regulation for your construction activity, it is not that kind of ultimately do not lead to any kind of punishment or some kind of they are identified uh, as a black spot in their what you call in the construction activity. So they have a tremendous leverage. They feel that they can do anything, and also I find somewhere that I don't like to mention in detail. Of course, there has been some kind of understanding between the contractor and those other party. So ultimately, if you see the gamut of all nexus circles, I think that could be also part of the systems until unless we make the systems very strong and with respect to the legal application. I think these things continue to go, and it is absolutely going to be very difficult to stop this kind of activity. Because though you are taking a measure today, but after a month, perhaps you'll also conduct the same show because the same negligence. So there should be some kind of act which has to
But
come
don't
from
you think we would be
our
able to stop this if there was more maintenance of the roads that are not fully constructed, the bridges that are not completely ready? If you had more people working on this, don't you
yes,
think we could stop this?
obviously. So as you say very rightly, when this kind of construction takes place, and I think that most of the time the heavy precautions are taken place, and not only that, not only provided safety barriers, but also you also find the alternative route. That's another important part. So road safety auditor ensure that bridge is practically has been doesn't have what do you call easy link. It has been cut somewhere. I'm using this under construction. So therefore, they also ensure that and there should be
Yes.
some kind of the diversion signages that when he come up to the bridge, and you know that exactly where he has to divert. So even that measures also has to be placed in case there is a shortcomings in all respect. So what can you do? And this is going to be repeated time and again.
All right, Mr. Pathasati, Mr. Sarkar, I want to thank you so much for taking out the time discussing this with us. Ultimately, there are various angles to what has happened. Of course, the responsibility does lie with the officials. But when we talk about the aspects, it's an incomplete bridge where cars are able to get onto it and tragically drive off, as has happened in this incident. Google Maps took the travelers onto the incomplete bridge, someone driving who seemed unaware of their surroundings. But civic apathy does seem to be the main culprit here. That's also what the officials say, because the spotlight is now on the PWD. Ideally, the car shouldn't have been on the bridge in the first place. But in the past as well, dangerous directions have led people into the sea, onto a bridge where a portion of it had collapsed years beforehand, onto a flight of stairs. So a question does ultimately arise. How much trust should we put into the technology that we create to guide us?